Hello, welcome back to our Python course. And here now we want to briefly talk about how to do sentiment analysis. So you see, we've gone from the very basic Python beginning instructions of how to print and how to input something and how to make loops and variables to quite complex things. And this is the nice thing about Python. Python is a very expressive language that allows you to quickly do things. And it's also because it has all these libraries, all these modules that already incorporate lots of functionality that you don't have to program yourself. If you were trying to do this in one of the older languages like C, for example, you would be very busy for a long time, either searching for libraries that do what you want or writing them yourself. While in Python, everything is already available and you just need an import statement or to install something on your server, and then it immediately works. And so this is great. This allows us as beginners to very quickly come to do something useful. And this is what you will see now. So here we have our first really useful program, which is TextBlob analysis of a text. Now, TextBlob is a Python library to process textual data, and it can do natural language processing in English. So you can analyze the text, find the parts of speech, find all the verbs in it, find all the nouns in it. And also what is the most fun, I think, is to find the sentiment of a text. Now, this, you have to be a little careful about this. The sentiment of a text means whether the text is positive or negative, whether it's happy or unhappy. But this is only one variable, so it does not distinguish, for example, between positive, negative, happy, unhappy, optimistic, pessimistic. It just gives you one variable for the sentiment, good or bad, and this is positive or negative, right? And this goes across all these different categories, and the way it does it is very primitive. It just looks for particular words or particular combinations of words that are known to express particular emotional sentiments. This can very easily go wrong, so you have to be careful. This is only a very simple analysis of sentiment. It's good enough if you're going to judge, for example, like we will do in a later example, users' feedback on accommodations. Let's say you have something like the TripAdvisor, where people can say what they thought about their trip, about their hotel, and they can give some comments on the hotel, some feedback, and then you can analyze these with a sentiment analysis and find out whether people were happy about their hotel. So this is something that you can do, and there it doesn't matter so much if you get a sentiment wrong, right? If something is a little more positive than you thought or a little more negative, but you should not use it for anything really important if you don't very carefully look how it works and understand what exactly it does. Today we have better tools for sentiment analysis. If you really want to do sentiment analysis in great detail, obviously using a large language model will probably give you better results, because this understands the whole context in which your sentence is and understands irony and some things that the simple TextBlob object cannot understand. So TextBlob is not AI. It is just looking at particular words and word combinations. And it is easy to trick, as you will see in a moment. So how does TextBlob work? The thing you do is to take a piece of text, a string, right? You pass it to TextBlob, and it gives you back a special TextBlob object. And now this object has already the information you want. It does the analysis for you and gives you back the sentiment. So let's try this. We need a sample text file. So here is my text file. I will create a new file. And now I've created a text file, and I will now go and try to analyze it. And here's the code that will do that for me. First, you have to know the TextBlob is not installed in Colab. You have to install it first. And This is easy to do, surprisingly easy. Google allows you to install new stuff. And with this exclamation mark, you can execute statements on the command line of this server where we are running. And so what we do is to install TextBlob and download the corpora. The corpora are the libraries in English which make TextBlob understand the sentiments, which contain, the information whether particular words are happy or unhappy and so on. So this you have to install. You don't need to understand exactly what is downloaded and how it's installed. Just copy these 2 lines whenever you want to use TextBlob, copy them at the beginning and execute them as part of your program. It doesn't hurt if you execute them multiple times, then the TextBlob will already be installed. You will get a message, it's already there. So you can just do this every time. And as long as you have your session running, of course, this will keep being there. But when your session is terminated by Google, then this will disappear. So you have to do it again next time. So this is why it's better to just leave it in there and do it every time. Then we import files and we import the TextBlob module. And now we have to upload our text file. We talked about it before, how to do this. We open the file name, we read the file, and now we read the file in just one string, file read, and we pass this string text content to TextBlob. So we create a new TextBlob with this text content from our file, and we assign it to the variable blob. Blob is normally why it's called blob, right? In programming, you call a blob a binary large object. So this is not really a blob in the real sense, because binary would mean that it's not text, so it's something like a picture or something. But okay, here it's called a blob. A blob is a large object of data. And in this case, it's particularly misnamed because it's not even large, right? We have a very small piece of text. But, this is how they called it. So a blob is here what I get back from the TextBlob object. And that's it. And then I create my blob. So let's just do this for a moment here. I execute it. It connects to Python, and it will now first install what I asked it to install there. And now I have to browse for my text file. So let's get the text file somewhere. And now I created my text blob object. So now we have our blob object from the previous code block. And now I want to have a list of all words. So I have 80 words in this. And I want to print the first 10 words. This is what happens here. I take all words and take the first 10. So this is a slice, right, of this list, which says begin from the beginning and get me the first 10 words. And this is now what I get by directly reading this into the blob and saying words. So this is very nice because the TextBlob object takes away from us the requirement to go through and separate the words and replace the punctuation. It's doing all these things for us, right? We don't have to do anything. And then it goes through here. Let me clear the output from before. It goes through here and also gives me the noun phrases. So let's have a look at how this works. The first 10 words are here. It explains how water felt and so on. You remember this from before, and you see now it does it right with this. It takes this curly quote as a word, which is, again, not fully what we want, but it's better than taking it as part of a word, of the next word explains, right? So in this case, it does a better job. And then identify some noun phrases. Noun phrases are essentially nouns, and if they have an adjective, then the adjective is part of the noun phrase. But I find that this never really works very well. Anyway, let's continue now and do some sentiment analysis. Means we want to find the emotions of a text. And the emotional tone comes with 2 scores. I mentioned one before, so there are 2. One is the polarity, which is a number between -1 and +1. Negative score means negative emotions. The tone is negative. Positive means the tone is positive. And it goes from -1 to +1. And then the subjectivity A number between 0 and 1 tells you how subjective the author is in his evaluation. A score of 0 is very objective, factual. A score of 1 is very subjective, opinion-based. And we will see this. Let's just do 2 sentences without bothering with files now. I have 2 sentences. This is a brilliant, wonderfully written masterpiece. And the second one, the plot was predictable and the characters were boring. So before you try to guess what the output would be in the first and in the second case. So what is, this was a brilliant and wonderfully written masterpiece? Is this first subjective or objective? Think about it for a second. In my opinion, this is more subjective, right? The author doesn't really provide any reasons. It just says it is brilliant and wonderfully written, which are words that are not really factual, right? They are an opinion, right? So it's more a subjective statement. And the polarity, of course, is very positive. The second one, the polarity is neutral to negative, right? It's predictable and the characters are boring, is negative. It's not completely garbage, right? It's not completely trashing it, but it is not good. So it's reasonably negative, moderately negative, and it is not subjective. In this case, it's objective because it gives us reasons to believe that the plot is predictable and so on. So let us try this out now. Guess what the result would be. And you see in the first case I have a polarity of 0.95, which is a positive sentiment, right? It is very positive. In the second case, I have halfway negative polarity. It is negative, but it's not very extremely negative. And the subjectivity in the first one is 1, so it is very subjective. In the second is 0.75. It's a little more objective because it mentions plot and character, and it does not only express an opinion, but give some justification. So this is how this works. And then, of course, you can also do your sentiment analysis on the blob object, which we will do now. And when I execute this, you see that I'm just using the previous blob object that I already have. I execute it and I see the polarity is 0.08, so it's almost neutral, and the subjectivity is 0.5, so it's neutral in both cases. It doesn't have a strong bias or a strong expression of polarity or subjectivity in any case. We can use these functions for other purposes. We can find key concepts in files. We can, as I said already, find out whether things are facts or opinions. So I leave it to you to do more exercises on this if you want. Just examine multiple texts and look up the TextBlob object to see what functions it has and what it can calculate for you. But again, be aware this is not perfect. I have made many questionable experiences with TextBlob. It's also relatively easy to cheat. Let's try to cheat it. Perhaps this would be good to see for once what you can do here wrong to get it, give you a wrong result. So let's try the first blob instead of what it was. Now I try to give it something that will be evaluated wrongly. So one thing would be irony. You use positive words in a negative way. So let's say something like, the author believed that his piece is a wonderfully written masterpiece. And we will delete the second blob. And now let's execute this. The author was obviously convinced that this piece was a wonderfully written masterpiece. The subjectivity is 0.75, so it is pretty subjective. The polarity is 0.5, so it is positive, right? It's not extremely positive, but it is clearly positive. And it is not really, right? The author was obviously convinced that this is a masterpiece, means it is everything but, right? But here we get a polarity of 0.5. So you see it's relatively easy to trick it. I'm sure you will find other ways. While if I had used here now an LLM, it would have given me the correct evaluation of the sentence, because large language models are much more sophisticated. So today it's questionable how you can use TextBlob really, or whether you should just use a language model instead. And Python also has a way of communicating with large language models, so it's not much harder to use a language model instead of TextBlob. So perhaps you should consider this if you have more sophisticated applications. Okay, so that's it for the moment. Thank you and see you next time. Bye-bye.